centuries, women's rights have been constantly evolving. Throughout American history, women were not afforded the same rights as men. It was just a short time ago that women could not vote, attend college, compete in the workforce, or run for public office. A woman's highest calling was to be a servant to her home, her husband, and her children, without an outlet to discover herself as a person, apart from her home and family. Media reinforced this myth with every image, convincing women that her greatest life ambition was to make dinner for her family. Though some progress was made in the early 60s with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, discrimination in the workplace was very common in the 1970s. One woman who fought tirelessly for women's rights was Betty Friedan. Known as the stay-at-home mom turned women activist, Friedan became beset by restlessness, sadness, and emptiness at the state of being she found herself as an educated stay-at-home mom, and had the courage to ask herself the question, is this all? Was this all that I am capable of? Is this all that I can contribute to the world? In seeking no answer to this question, she created a survey to discover the true thoughts and feelings of stay-at-home mothers of her era. After giving the survey to her peers at her 15th year college class reunion, the early writings about the problem that has no name began. After years of rejection, these writings were eventually published by Norton and Company in 1963 in a book that sparked the second wave of the feminist movement called The Feminine Mystique.
Up until now, the politics of our two-party system, the politics of bosses and machines, has been based on manipulation of minorities by the white minority, the white male minority in power. What unites women as a majority, as evidenced here today, is the refusal to be manipulated any longer.
Friedan was born on February 4, 1921, with the maiden name of Betty Naomi Goldstein in Peoria, Illinois, to Harry and Miriam Goldstein. They were of Jewish descent from Russia and Hungary. Her father owned a jewelry store in Peoria, and her mother wrote for the society page for the newspaper. Friedan was always a bright and creative student and developed interest and skill in poetry in high school, and later attended an all-girls school called Smith College. There she won a scholarship prize in her first year of school for outstanding academic performance. She took up poetry her second year and published multiple poems. As a junior, she became editor-in-chief of the Smith College newspaper and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in psychology in 1942. From 1943 to 1944, Betty Friedan took on a fellowship for graduate work at the University of California, Berkeley. She studied in the field of psychology with Erik Erikson, which sparked her first interest in political and societal matters. 2 years after that, in 1946, Friedan wrote for the United Electrical Workers UEE News, where she reported on the House Un-American Activities Committee. In her later biography, she stated that she was dismissed from the UE News in 1952 because she was pregnant with her second child. Subsequently, she became a freelance writer for various magazines, including The Cosmopolitan, as she attempted to embrace the life of a stay-at-home mother. In 1947, Betty married Carl Friedan. Together they had 3 children. In her biography, Carl Friedan is quoted as saying, "She changed the course of history almost single-handedly. It took a driven, super-aggressive, egocentric, almost lunatic dynamo to rock the world the way she did. Unfortunately, she was that same person at home where that kind of conduct does not work. She never understood this." The couple divorced 6 years after The Feminine Mystique was published. As a freelance journalist with 3 children, she tried to interest magazine editors in stories about the unhappy and unfulfilled, educated wives and mothers she encountered among her Smith College friends and suburban neighbors, but no one was interested. But she continued to work, and in addition to reading the works of social scientists and conducting hundreds of interviews with women, Friedan analyzed advertisements, short stories, and feature articles in popular women's magazines. Writing in longhand on yellow legal pads, Friedan wrote and rewrote numerous drafts. The text that was published in 1963 took Friedan more than 5 years to complete. As Friedan's family life struggled, the response to her Feminine Mystique book began to change women's lives. Friedan used the feminine mystique to describe a general sadness among American housewives who felt trapped by the expectation that they be fulfilled solely by the role of wife and mother. Friedan's assertion that women needed meaningful work to be fulfilled launched her book to the New York bestseller list and began a national conversation about gender equality. After this, Betty Friedan took her message to the streets and lecture halls.
In the 1950s, for instance, the early 60s, with this one image of woman and embellished by enormous psychological, psychoanalytic jargon, where woman is defined, feminine fulfillment is defined solely in woman's sexual relation to man, as man's wife, mother, sex object, server of physical needs of husband, children, and home, but never defining herself as a person by her own actions in society.
The feminine mystique was a sensation among readers, and it changed Betty Friedan's life. She was sought by the media as an expert on women's status in America. Friedan capitalized on her fame to found and promote several organizations seeking political and legal equality for women, including the National Organization for Women in 1966, where she served as its first president until 1970. After stepping down as the president of NOW, she organized a nationwide protest for women's equality in New York City, which coincided with the 50th anniversary of the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. The event attracted 500,000 men and women and was a catalyst for broadening the feminist movement. Through her illustrious life, she became infamous from many quotes from her feminine mystique work. Here are some of the quotes of Betty Friedan that help liberate women and transform our culture. Friedan's life work has affected women, young and old, and those yet to be born. As I interviewed both an 80-year-old businesswoman and a 40-year-old teacher and coach, I learned firsthand that Friedan's vision for women to create and produce according to their own desire is thriving and will be her legacy forever.
The biggest lie?
Yes.
That women cannot hold down, like being president of a large corporation or CEO. I can make my own decisions. I like to do what I want to do, and I don't want to have to always talk it over with someone.
Purpose for educating women today. What do you think personally?
So they can compete in the world with men and win.
What do you believe women will contribute to society in the future?
Anything they want to do.
Is having an education a priority to you, and why?
It is absolutely a priority to me, and it always has been, and both my mother and my father instilled that in me since I was very young. My father's phrase of getting an education was that I needed to put many, many tools in my toolbox of life so that I could figure out what I wanted to do with my tools and my gifts.
As Camille Paglia puts it, Betty Friedan wasn't afraid to be called abrasive. She pursued her feminist principles with a flamboyant pugnacity that has become all too rare in these yuppified times. She hated girliness and bourgeois decorum and never lost her earthly ethnicity.